as evidenced in Darfur and Kordofan. Unfortunately, many more regions are likely experiencing famine-like conditions. Again, as a comparison, it is only the third time in the 21st century that famine is declared worldwide. Sudan is also the epicenter of the largest protection crisis in the world. Appalling reports of atrocious international humanitarian law and human rights violations have been witnessed throughout the country, in particular the most conflict-affected areas. To further aggravate things, rape and gender-based violence committed by both belligerent parties are also used as tactics on the battlefield. 6.7 million people are at risk of gender-based violence. Displaced refugees, migrant women and girls, or even little boys are particularly vulnerable. Sex crimes and violence in conflict is a war crime. In Sudan, we have to continue to push for peace. Together with our regional and international partners, including the African Union and the United Nations, we call for an immediate ceasefire and a sustainable political solution to the conflict. The EU continues to engage with both warring parties, mainly through the work of the EU Special Representatives for the Horn of Africa. There must be accountability for crimes committed too. This is also a part and parcel of rebuilding Sudan once the war is over. Finally, the EU will keep funding initiatives across the globe that provide survivors with healthcare, legal assistance and psychosocial support. And we call on others to do so as well. For the victims, wherever you are, the EU's message is clear. You are not alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Kolēģi, šīs debates tagad ir slēgtas. Esmu saņēmis 7 rezolūciju priekšlikumus.
I have received 7 draft resolutions. The vote will take place tomorrow. Now we have the next item, which unlawful detention and sham trials of Armenian hostages, including high-ranking political representatives from Nagorno-Karabakh by Azerbaijan. I'd like to give the floor to the author of the document, Ms. Lexman. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, colleagues, Commissioner. Over 20 political hostages, which were imprisoned during the ethnic cleansing of Christian Armenians from Nagorno-Karabakh, are still detained in Azerbaijan. They are facing inhuman conditions and sham trials, which could result in their life imprisonment. This is the real face of Aliyev's regime which oppresses its own citizens and disregards international obligations. While the European Union comes with a strategic partnership, the regime in Baku continues to threaten its neighbours and thwart efforts toward regional peace. In the current geopolitical environment, there is a strong need for the EU to defend its values, especially in its closest neighbourhood. Instead, we are again appeasing the oppressor and rewarding Aliyev's actions with enhanced trade. Have we not learned the lesson? It's time to stop dreaming about a strategic partnership, face reality and act in accordance to our values and principles. We have to take an urgent action and address claims and these clear violations of basic human rights and assure that the hostages are immediately and unconditionally released. Leading judges and prosecutors who play a role in these unjust trials should face sanctions. And we have to make sure that any future cooperation with Azerbaijan is based on conditions of the release of all the political prisoners and demonstrated readiness of Baku to engage in a peace agreement which would respect the rights of Nagorno-Karabakh Armenians. Thank you.
Paldies. Vārds autoram Vasilijam.
Thank you very much. The floor now goes to Mr. Dinky for 2 minutes.
Domnule președinte,
President, colleagues, the situation of political prisoners in Nagorno-Karabakh raises a big question mark about the justice, stability, and peace in this part of the Caucasus. Now, of course, like James Forsyth said, this region is one of the most colorful and vivid in the world. And there are so many diverging interests that any diplomatic action is very complicated. Yet, when it comes to the peace and stability in the Caucasus, the European Parliament never strayed from its principles. It always called for the sovereignty and the independence of Armenia. We've had several resolutions in March and in October last year. However, we still see that there is a very aggressive rhetoric from the Azerbaijan state against the political detainees in Nagorno-Karabakh. We want to be part of the trials, and we want to support sanctions against the Azerbaijani officials who commit such judicial abuse. We need to strictly sanction these officials and to discourage further future abuse. The prospects are far from being positive. And given the military landscape in the area, I think we should act now and adopt concrete measures to prevent a future tragedy. And this is something that the Commission should look into. As I said, this region of the Southern Caucasus is very complicated, which is why we need to be diplomatic, smart, but also firm to protect our values and human rights. These prisoners are not just a number. They are somebody's brothers, children, or parents. They deserve to be free, and their release should be part of a wider effort to build a future based on mutual trust and cooperation, but first of all, respect for the global order and for rules. We need to fight for this and keep this vision alive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The floor now goes to Mr. Gyadi for 1 minute.
It's been more than 1 year since Azerbaijan's attack on Nagorno-Karabakh, and Armenians are still kept away from their homeland. And they haven't managed to heal the wounds from the loss of their traditional, the traditions and their territory. They're still being subjected to humiliation and repression. Unfortunately, Aliyev's regime does not only not respect international law and human rights, but it continues to illegally occupy Armenian territory. The EU needs to safeguard democratic values as they stem from ancient Greece. It needs to stand firm against Azerbaijan and Turkey that are international criminals. We need to put a stop to national cleansing that they have taken, that has happened against the Armenian and the Greek and Cypriot peoples.
The next speaker is Ms. Loiseau for 1 minute.
Nous sommes réunis aujourd'hui pour...
We're here today to demand the release of the 23 Armenian hostages held by Baku, who are undergoing a deeply unfair trial. I'm the author of this initiative, and I'd like to thank my co-authors. The trial underway bears close comparison with the Stalinist trials, and the hostages are being deprived of fair treatment, and their only crime being Armenian. But I'd like to speak to Kaya Kallas, regretting that once again she's not here to listen to us. Madam High Representative, I'd like to thank you for sending material to Armenia via the European Peace Facility, and I'd also like to welcome the extension of the mandate of the European Union mission in Armenia. It's doing an excellent job, and I would encourage you to see the work it's doing on the ground yourself. Madam High Representative, I was recently in Armenia, and I hope that you will go there soon. You'll see a country that wants peace, that dreams of Europe, that is faced with a neighbour, Azerbaijan, which continues to threaten it and is one of Russia's greatest allies. I hope you'll resist the call of those who call for an equidistant approach to Yerevan and Baku. And I hope that you will bear in mind that Azerbaijan is carrying out a policy of hostile interference towards France. And that can't remain unresponded to.
Next speaker, author Marina Mejur.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President. 2 years ago, we saw a crime against humanity take place against deafening silence. In Nagorno-Karabakh, tried to discuss with the Aliyev regime. These people's identity goes back millennia, and faced with a tragedy, Europe was not able to act with Baku. Today, we must act to demand the liberation of detainees held by Azerbaijan. They're being held and tortured, and their only crime is having defended their people and their land and their rights. If we do nothing, it means we're sending out a clear message to Aliyev that he can continue what he's doing against Armenia with impunity. So silence is no longer an option. We have to send out a clear signal. Armenia, it does not stand alone. We stand united by their sides to ensure respect for their sovereignty, territorial integrity, and their right to live in peace and security without fear from new aggression from their Azerbaijani neighbours.
The next speaker is Mr. Mathieu Vallée, for 1 minute.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, President. Once again, we are deploring, condemning the hostile activities of Azerbaijan in Nagorno-Karabakh. Now, we have had several requests, but there was ethnic cleansing there, but there's been silence around this. What about the hostile approach from Azerbaijan towards France, which is a member state of the European Union? There's a spreading of disinformation in New Caledonia. And what about our police, our firemen in New Caledonia? And they wanted to defend this European territory. Therefore, it's important to defend the strategic autonomy of this territory in the Indo-Pacific. This is key for fisheries, science, energy in the European Union across the world. Thank you. Thank you very much. The next speaker goes to Ms. Vieira for 1 minute.
Dear Chair, dear colleagues, Azerbaijan is facing a deep human rights crisis. The government installed severe restrictions on freedom of expression, assembly and association, and weaponized the legal system against critical voices. Armenian detainees are one of the groups most severely affected by the government's policies. Ill treatment is widespread and fair trials have become an illusion. I am glad that this Parliament is consistently and strongly addressing the situation, but sadly, we seem to be the only EU institution doing so. We cannot allow continuing business as usual with Azerbaijan, sacrificing our values because of economic and energy interests. This is not only hypocritical, but it generates dependencies, making us vulnerable for blackmail. Have we not learned any lesson from our dependencies with Russia in the past? It is time we prioritize human rights above cheap oil and gas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The next speaker, Thomas Frohlich.
Die Armenier sind ein stolzes Volk, das ein
Armenia is a proud people. It's been attacked by Azerbaijan. It's been abandoned by the European Union, but also by Russia. And there's been attacks on Nagorno-Karabakh, hundreds of deaths, hundreds of thousands. Armenians have had to flee, and many are being held hostage today. We've had a systematic destruction of the cultural heritage of the first Christian country in the world. Why do we hear so little about this? Well, it's because European politicians play a shameful role. Politicians from the CDU have been accused of corruption and looking away when Christians in Armenian Christians are being expelled. And there's also 30 million euros that have been involved in this, and we should be hearing more about this. But stability in the Southern Caucasus is in our interest. We need peace talks and we need proper treatment of Armenian hostages Armenian people and also the Armenian cultural heritage. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now for the EPP, it's Ms. Sherba for 1 minute.
Commissioner, President, this is a very timely debate. Everything in the content of the draft resolution has been said already. However, I still have a few reflections. The Armenian authorities, since they lost the hold on Nagorno-Karabakh, decided to change the course of their external policy. If we are thinking about further integration of Armenia with the West, we should enhance our economic ties with them. We should be more active and more visible in Armenia. We should also prolong the activity of the civic mission in that country for another 2 years. That means we will be seen as a mediator between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and we should be all oriented towards long-standing permanent peace over there. What we are getting as information about torture and detentions cannot pass unnoticed. We have to fight for European values, for human dignity and for rule of law. Thank you.
So, Socialist and Democratic Group, Vitenis Povilos Andriukaitis.
Pirmininkė, komisarė, kolegos, po Azerbaijan.
President, Commissioner, colleagues, after the military actions by Azerbaijan in Karabakh, we can say that there is no more Armenia there. Azerbaijan has carried out ethnic cleansing. This is a war crime. Azerbaijan has international obligations, the International Human Rights Declaration and the international legal obligations. So the country should be sanctioned. There are Armenian people who have been imprisoned. Their conditions of detention are terrible. Some have declared a hunger strike, and so their health is under threat. We have to make all possible efforts to try to find a solution. Political prisoners should be released as soon as possible. Azerbaijan does not want an end to this conflict and does not want to respond to the international community's demands.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we are discussing another important resolution about the unlawful detention and sham trials of Armenian hostages, including senior political representatives from Nagorno-Karabakh. The annexation of this region by Azerbaijan has triggered a humanitarian crisis and a mass exodus of Armenian civilians. The situation calls for concrete actions such as establishing a human rights monitoring mission, organizing talks between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and making future EU cooperation with Azerbaijan conditional on progress in human rights. For years, the EU has been interfering in Poland's democratic order. Now it is planning to organize a round table on the democratic presidential elections in Poland to prevent a non-partisan candidate from winning. But it is not reacting where human rights are really being violated. Europe, this is not the time for loud speeches.
who are being illegally detained.
François Xavier Bellamy.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, Monsieur le Commissaire. Alors voilà.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, we've reached a summit of indecency. Aliyev attacks Nagorno-Karabakh, attacking a population that just wished to live in peace on its own land that it's been living on for thousands of years now. Aliyev is deporting civilian populations using bombs and armaments and jihadist mercenaries. And after having done that, he's blaming the victims. 23 Armenian prisoners are undergoing a show trial which recalls the peak of Stalin. And what is Europe doing? Remaining silent. Commissioner, you're responsible for energy. How can you justify the import of gas from Azerbaijan with a specific contract, with the specific provisions contained therein? How can we justify criminals doing heinous acts in Europe and while the gas still flows? Isn't it as bad getting gas from Baku as it is from Moscow? Isn't it the same gas? We await an answer on this, Commissioner.
So we don't have any speaker on KHZI procedures. That's why I will ask Commissioner Jorgensen to take floor.
President, honourable members, like this House, the Commission are following the trials against the 16 Karabakh Armenian defendants that are taking place at the Baku military court since January 17th of this year. We are aware that human rights organizations have expressed concerns over the fairness of the trials and treatments of the accused. Many of you have expressed similar concerns here today. We take these concerns very seriously and are closely following the developments. The right to a fair trial must be ensured and respected. The EU Special Representative for the South Caucasus is also closely following related issues and relaying our concerns to the authorities in Baku. Our relationship with Azerbaijan is founded on principles both sides have committed themselves to. First and foremost, the respect for human rights and the rule of law. The European Union will therefore continue to call on the government of Azerbaijan to abide by its international obligations, which include the rights to due process and fair trial. We will use every opportunity to urge Azerbaijan to ensure dignified and safe conditions for detainees. The reports of torture and ill treatment should be promptly and impartially investigated. The trials of Baku military court touch on the much larger question of achieving lasting and sustainable peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan, of building a peaceful, stable and prosperous South Caucasus. We therefore continue to call on both Armenia and Azerbaijan to build on their achievements and to continue making progress on their path towards full normalization of relations. It is important that the governments of both countries take their societies along on the path. The EU will continue to support this process with all the tools at our disposal. We stand ready to help the parties in their dialogue aimed at achieving lasting and sustainable peace. Honourable members, I am grateful for this House's persistence in drawing attention to the situation in Azerbaijan and the wider region. It is an expression of our shared commitment to human rights and the rule of law as a guiding principle in our engagement with Azerbaijan and other partners around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Colleagues, we are closing debate on this point in agenda. I received 8 proposals for resolution and vote will take place tomorrow. Before we will go to the next point in agenda, I would like to welcome delegation from the Parliamentary Assembly of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is participating in a 6th EU-Bosnia and Herzegovina Stabilization and Association Parliamentary Committee meeting. Welcome. This late night, but welcome. Kolēģi, mums nākamais darba kārtības punkts ir komisijas paziņojums.
Thank you. Now we have Commission statement, secessionist threats in Bosnia and Herzegovina and the recent escalation in tensions. I'd now like to give the floor to the Commission. And to Commissioner Hansen, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, honourable members. 1 year has passed since the historic decision of the European Council to open EU accession negotiations with Bosnia and Herzegovina. It seems the reform enthusiasm has evaporated and Bosnia and Herzegovina has again entered into an institutional and political crisis. To get back on track, we call on all political actors to continue taking resolute action to finalise reforms in line with the EU acquis and European standards. In this regard, it is crucial to continue addressing the relevant steps to move forward on the EU path. It is what the vast majority of citizens of Bosnia and Herzegovina expects. The Commission continuously supports the country in this endeavour. Despite turbulence in the ruling majority, the adoption in Parliament on 30th of January of the law on personal data protection, a precondition for cooperation with Eurojust, and the law on border control was a good signal into the right direction. We need further progress, and this means in particular the adoption of the law on courts and the law on high judicial and prosecutorial council fully in line with European standards. The appointment of a chief negotiator also remains important. Let's also remind Bosnia and Herzegovina not to lose the opportunity of over €1 billion of investments through the growth plan for the Western Balkans. Therefore, it is important for the country to submit its reform agenda without further delay. It is even more important in view of the Western Balkans Leaders Summit on the growth plan in Skopje next week on the 19th and the 20th of March. Contrary to the progress on the EU path, recent actions by the Republika Srpska leadership following the first instance ruling in the criminal trial against Milorad Dodik and on the 26th of February present a serious setback. On Thursday, 27th of February, the Republika Srpska National Assembly adopted 4 laws in urgent procedure, including to ban state-level judicial and police bodies from operating in the entity, to set up a separate judiciary council, and to target NGOs as foreign agents. These legal acts undermine the constitutional and legal order of Bosnia and Herzegovina and the functioning